Hi, my name is Joe Williams, and I wanted to. Oh, first of all, I work as a licensed clinical social worker in New Jersey. I'm licensed in New Jersey and Pennsylvania, and I just want to say at the outset that I I believe in freedom of thought, freedom of expression, and freedom of religion, and these are. I just wanted to talk about my experience in particular in the Christian faith, and where I started off and where I am now, and focus in particular on a church that I went to in the 1990s. I don't exactly remember the years I was there, but I would say that I started off, I was an Episcopalian. I went to a church called the St. Thomas African Episcopal Church. It's a historic African American Episcopal church founded by Absalom Jones and Richard Allen. And that was on 52nd and Parish. They've since moved out to City Avenue. I was heavily involved in that church. I was an acolyte, which is sort of like an altar boy. I went to the church because my dad was a member. The late Dr. Benjamin Williams. One time I asked him why he was in the church, and he said that they had cute girls and he could get free wine. So I thought that was at least very honest and candid. Anyway, so I used to go there. Sometimes I would go from like 6 they would have like a 6 o'clock service, 6 a.m., 9 a.m., 11 a.m., and I think 1 p.m. So I'd sometimes spend the entire day there. So then when I was in college, I went to Temple University, and I remember, I think I was a junior. I took a little long to go to college. So I think it was 1993, I want to say. And I was approached by some students, and they asked me if I wanted to come to a Bible study, I think. And it was nice to make friends. So I went. I liked this church because it was very multi ethnic, black, white, Latino, Asian, pretty much everybody. And you think, okay, if there is a God, then certainly God would want all of his people going to church together. And also it was very diverse in terms of socioeconomic status. So you had people working class, uh, people who were very wealthy. I did notice later that it seemed to me, at least, that the leaders were living pretty nicely. Okay. This church, by the way, was part of the International Church of Christ. I believe it was founded by a guy named Kip McKeon. What I did like about this church is, first of all, it's non-denominational. That was another thing. I never quite understood why there were some 3,000 different kinds of Christian. To me, it seemed like if you're a Christian, you're a Christian. Okay. So they were very intense. Like they really studied the Bible, and they really took it seriously. I was really surprised by how well educated a lot of the people in the church were. Like there were doctors, people went to the University of Pennsylvania, Swarthmore College, Haverford College, summa cum laude, Penn Med students, law students, lawyers. There's a guy who's an aerospace engineering major 4.0. So I used to, and in fact, I remember one guy in particular had just received his PhD in organic chemistry from MIT. I think the church itself actually started on Harvard University's campus. So I never quite really understood Christianity or even the story of Jesus, but I figured, well, if they understand it, they probably know better than I do. And I think if there's any particular lesson that I learned is that it's okay to trust your own thinking. Because I would say it took me about 5 years. I finally did get baptized to the church. I'd already been baptized in the Episcopalian church and confirmed, but I did it again. Third time's a charm. Although it was a different kind of baptism, they insisted on immersion, right? So, and they were very heavily interested in evangelism. They were accused of being a cult. I think 2020 did a show on the International Church of Christ, and I think former news anchor here in Philadelphia, Beverly Williams, also came out to the church one time. And in my opinion, Christianity in a way is a cult, because I believe the definition of a cult is the zealous following of an individual, namely Jesus, right? So, okay. So eventually, the more that I read the Bible, I started having more and more doubts. I had more and more questions. And I remember at Temple, I was taking a course called Critical Thinking, Writing and Critical Thinking, with a guy named Peter J. Muckley. He was a guy, he went to Oxford as an undergraduate and was getting his PhD from Temple. I think he met with us maybe 4 times. First of all, he came in the room and he said that he was crossing out the words critical thinking. And he said, if you don't know how to think critically, I'm not sure that this course is going to make much of a difference. I thought it was pretty funny. It was funny. He didn't look like an Oxford graduate. Like, he wore these like open-toed shoes. He looked kind of scruffy. But he told us we could write papers on any topic that we wanted to. So I tried in my class for my paper to prove the historicity of Jesus. So I looked, and I was really surprised that there really wasn't that much there. I remember I kept taking out this book by Albert Schweitzer, and then I think I read Josephus and some of the others, and it was kind of scanty. There really wasn't much there. So he wrote me a note. He read my book. I think he gave me a B or something. And he said that there was a little bit of old Tom Aquinas with me, and that I did a good job of trying to prove the historicity of Jesus, but there was not much evidence. I've been out of church since, I guess, about 1999, and now I look back on it, and I can't believe I was actually ever a Christian. Recently, I used to read, Richard Dawkins' book, The God Delusion, and I was a fan of Christopher Hitchens before he kind of went right wing right after the Iraq War. Then he transformed into this kind of anti-theist. But recently I've been reading the work of Richard Carrier, a guy I wouldn't mind interviewing, actually, if I could really get this YouTube channel with interviews. I have one so far. But anyway, he suggests that Jesus probably didn't even exist, and in fact was a Jewish adaptation of previous myths, starting off with Inanna, and I think he talked about Romulus, but there's several elements of the story of Jesus which appeared in other dying and rioting cults, and he also suggests that Jesus may very well be a sort of a remake of Elijah and or Moses. It's kind of fascinating to me. He also argues that only Mark is original, but even Mark wouldn't have been around during the time of Jesus, and that his argument. Now I have to, I mean, Dr. Carrier has a PhD from Columbia University in early Christian history. I don't, but so I mean, I certainly can't take the time out to reproduce his research, but it all sort of makes sense to me now. There were like myths in the region, and even like things like December 25th, and so many elements of the story of the baptism. He argues that Jesus was initially a celestial figure. He has a book called Jesus from Outer Space. And then he was euhemerized, sort of like Uranus or Zeus, where in order to give somebody more credibility, you make them a historical figure, right? And so that I realized long after I went to the church. But it was really strange in the church, like homosexuality was a sin. I started to question that. You have to go through. You can only date people in the church. I think that was another rule. I remember I wrote a list of about 50 questions that I had about, basically from Genesis. Were Adam and Eve? Are we all inbred? Science. And another thing is, I remember one of the guys in the church. He was a summa cum laude 4.0 student from Harvard College. He was a Penn medical student at the time. Now he's a physician. And I remember he studied biology as an undergraduate. And I said, hey, how do you jive, Christianity with biology and evolution? So he said, stop asking me stupid questions. And he just kept going. And then the guy who had the PhD from MIT in organic chemistry, he said that at MIT, he felt that the students were so far advanced into, he said, like, than the general public. They were like 25 years into the future. And he thought the future looked very frightening, and Christianity at least gave him some sense of stability, right? And there were people in there who had previously had substance abuse problems, and they felt as though Jesus saved them. I was listening to Bertrand Russell. He famously wrote a book called Why I'm Not a Christian. And first of all, he doesn't think that Jesus was the greatest of all humans. I think he said Socrates, and I forgot who else he would put on the list. And one of the reasons he didn't think Jesus was the greatest of all human beings was because of hell, right? Because Jesus is very clear. First of all, if you accept that Jesus existed, right, which I don't think so personally. But even if he did exist, Bertrand Russell is saying, wait a minute, let's really take a look at this guy. He's basically saying, like, look, I love you, right? But if you don't love me back, you're going to hell. And I remember sitting in church. I think I'd already been sort of a fan of Bertrand Russell's and reading his books already, but I just thought about hell. Everybody else is singing about going to heaven. I would think about all of the people I've known who are in hell. I mean, personally, but if you look at historical figures, would Gandhi be in hell? Albert Einstein? How about him? but then Jerry Falwell maybe would be in heaven. So all you need to do is accept Jesus's, um, you know, sacrifice, and then you go to heaven. You don't really have to do anything. Um, you know, I would also say that you know, the Christian story goes sort of like this, I think. So Eve ate the fruit from the tree of life, and then for wanting to have knowledge, she was cursed. And not only is she cursed, and she and Adam are made to wear clothes, and then somehow they had Cain and Abel, and then from them came the entire human species. So we're all sort of inbred anyway. So they're all punished, and the only way to save humanity is for God to have His Son brutally murdered, and He also has to be married. He also has to have a baby with a virgin, because that would make Jesus pure. And then you don't really know much about Jesus. You know about him as a baby, and then there's no Gospels covering childhood through his teenage years, although apparently there's many other Gospels. They just haven't been included. And I think there's 3 years of his life included. So it's not that much. And then you have to think about who made the decisions about what Gospels stay in and what Gospels don't go in. I understand the church, it was a pretty fast growing church. I mean, as far as churches go, I mean, I guess it was one of the better churches. I remember one time, however, we had a men's group, and I forgot the guy's name, but he's a pastor, and he was saying that there was a problem with lust. That was a big sin, and that is a sin that Jesus talks about. I mean, supposedly Jesus was completely asexual, right? You know, he said, don't even look at a woman lustfully, right? And so this guy said, you might as well, if you're going to masturbate, you might as well just masturbate directly into the Bible, because that's what you're doing anyway. God's watching you. So there's a lot of, you're not doing things because they're simply the right thing to do. You're doing things because you're under surveillance. You're doing things because you're going to be punished. Even if you look at, I think it's Kohlberg's hierarchy of morals, right? The highest level is sort of like you just simply do things because it's the right thing to do. And now I would also like to say that psychology seems to be moving in the direction, or at least some of us, I certainly am, of the work of somebody like John McKell, right? He's over at Georgetown Law School. He wrote a book called Elements of Moral Cognition, right? Where he is looking at the work of Noam Chomsky and John Rawls. And I believe, if I understand him correctly, he's arguing that morality it doesn't come from religion. It really comes from, it's sort of innate, and I would say it's also universal, because human beings are pretty much the same anyway. So I think the idea that we need Christianity or Judaism, and Richard Carrier actually also argue. I mean, he's not really an expert in Judaism, but he goes on to say that the patriarchs of Judaism are also mythological characters. And that Judaism's really a lot of adaptations of previous mythologies in the region. So, I mean, I do find it fascinating. I find religion absolutely fascinating. And I would simply encourage people to, if you're going to have a Holy Scripture, read it, understand what you're purporting to believe in from cover to cover, even though I didn't read it from cover to cover. Actually, I couldn't even really get through Genesis and take it seriously, to be honest with you. And then, read the other religious texts as well. Read the Bible, read the Quran. I'm talking about billions upon billions of people are influenced by these books. So check them out and trust your own thinking, and really think critically and scrutinize whatever you read. All right. Thank you. Take care.